All right, so I'm here in this snazzy suit because Keynote is throwing their reInvent party tonight, but I was listening on the side to Peter DeSantis' keynote and I saw a lot of really great things. As always, Peter takes us deep on the infrastructure and teaches us how AWS actually operates at scale. I want to cover a few announcements and I've got some notes because it's hard to memorize it all, but essentially the first thing that they talked about was continuous ground-up investment. If you think about the miles and miles of fiber optic cables and all of the silicon that has to get made to make AWS work, at the end of the day, it's pretty impressive that the scale continues to grow. So the first launch we had was Nitro v5. Nitro v5 is a new version of custom silicon that sits at the top of the rack as well as on the instances, and it has 60% higher PPS, 30% lower latency time, 40% better energy performance, 2 times the transistor count, 50% DRAM speed, and then it's got double the PCIe bandwidth. Then that enables a couple of new instance types. There's the C7GN. This is a Graviton-based instance that has enhanced networking. Pretty impressive launch. And there's also the launch of a new Graviton 3E processor. So this enables a high HPC type instance, which is, to my knowledge, a new instance class. I've never heard of it before. But HPC 7G is built on top of the Graviton platform, and it has some pretty impressive performance numbers, and it's actually the first Graviton-based HPC instance that I've seen. Then we get the R7IZ instances. These are high clock speed instances that are Intel-based and used for basically high RAM, high fast memory. Then we have a lot of talk about the EFA, the Elastic Fabric Adapter, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the kernel bypass and the RDMA access that's enabled through EFA is very impressive and enables some of the networking stats we're going to hear about in a moment here. Or then we dove into the SRD, Scalable Reliable Datagram Protocol, which frankly, seeing that on a keynote stage with all these customers was a massive treat. Do yourself a favor, go watch that section of the keynote yourself. It's about 30 minutes in. And they talk about multipath and retries in microseconds instead of having to do multiple flows of traffic. And it talks more about how Nitro enables that and faster EBS performance. So then we get into something that's a new launch, which is the Elastic Network Adapter Express launch. Now, this is something you can enable, I think, on your existing Elastic Network adapters, and my hope is that this will somehow enable faster networking performance for Lambdas. And this is bringing the SRD protocol in the mainstream. And for those of you who don't know, SRD is reliable UDP. So instead of a TCP flow, you're just getting regular old UDP traffic, but it's guaranteed transmission. Then we get into something that is completely mind-blowing. We have the Trainium 1N instances, which enable 1.6 terabits of networking throughput. So that's completely bonkers, and I'm gonna have to try it, and apologies to our CEO for wasting all of our money on spinning that instance up. And then we got some talk about how machine learning is evolving and how new models exist, and they're very large, and you need these larger instances to be able to run those models. And then we got some things that I liked. We dove very briefly into serverless. There were some very impressive stats put on the board by Peter. You know, Lambda is operating at tens of trillions of invocations, and I find that very impressive. Finally, we got a nice little mention of Firecracker and how that's enabling something called Snap Start. This is going to reduce cold start times. It's going to be a 90% reduction in cold start times. I think that's pretty incredible. It'll certainly help with Java functions, but there's a lot of optimizations you can do anyway to make Java functions more fast and more resilient to cold starts. Overall, a wonderful way to start reInvent. I'm really, really impressed. I think the keynote was very well done, and I enjoyed the customers they brought on stage as well. If you do have extra time, go watch it yourself. Otherwise, stick with us for the rest of the week. I'm gonna do my best to try and recap all of these, and I promise I won't be in the tux for the next one. Thank you so much for joining us, and go to Keynote.com to learn more about Keynote.